Hey guys, welcome to another Scrambler Tips, and this week we're covering off on the exhaust. Okay, so before we get started, what I want to talk about is there's a difference between 2021, 22 onwards and the 19 or 18, 19, 20 model Scramblers. The earlier Scramblers have the cat in here. The 22 models onwards actually had the catalytic converter up in the rear cans, I call them, or the rear mufflers. A lot of people take this out because they experience a fair bit of heat up here, but there's a few things to consider. It can damage your bike if you run just pure straight through pipes. So I actually kept my catalytic converter in the bike, and then I got this little leg saver, which I find quite nice. It just keeps the heat directly off your leg and gives you a little bit of standoff here to be able to get some airflow through. Okay, so you can see here the biggest visual difference between the stock and the aftermarket exhaust is the rear section. That's because the slash cuts are literally just hollow steel pipes, whereas the stock mufflers have a bunch of sound deadening and airflow restrictions inside them. Okay, so just a hot tip. Don't do this if your bike's just been running. You'll burn the absolute out of your hands. Okay, so first step is just to remove the heat shields. It's basically the same for all models, and it's just the 4 Allen key screw heads. Remove the rearmost shield first, then the middle, which might clip under the right hand front one, and then last shield to remove is the front. What you need to do to get this off though is to just slide it to the right and then pull outwards, because it's got a couple of tabs that hold it in place. Next is the exhaust clamps. These hold the rear half of the exhaust onto the front half and prevent gas leaking out. Make sure you note the position of these screws for when you put the exhaust back together. I generally just take a photo with my phone for reference because my memory is terrible. Now, where was I? Right, yeah, so the last mount for the rear section of the exhaust is just this bolt to the front of the rear shock. Undo that. Next, you want to make sure that you've got a soft piece of wood or a very soft aluminium punch, and what you're going to do is find a location that you can kind of, using a hammer, tap on the punch and remove the rear half of the exhaust until it's completely off. Take care not to drop the rear piece because it can be easily damaged. Now, if you're just swapping the rear part of the exhaust, you can skip ahead to the fitting section, but if you're looking to do a decat or swap out the front headers or give the front headers a polish, then keep on watching. Next is a 12mm socket with an extension bar and ratchet, also known as a wrench. Undo the right header bolts and then slide the collar off, so then you can access the oxygen sensor, also known as the O2 sensor, and using an open-ended spanner, undo the O2 sensor and then gently sit it out of the way. Next is the exhaust header clamp. This joins the left-hand header to the right-hand header. Now, the easiest way to do this is just to use a 10mm socket. It's a bit tricky, so you might need to just play with a few different lengths of extension bars to get the right size first, and then once you get it, just undo the tension on it. It will also slide around a bit and can attract a bit of rust, so it might need a little bit of lubricant to get it going first. Once that's done, you should be able to wiggle the right hand header until it's completely detached, and then what you need to do is make sure you put it in a safe spot for later. Now we're on to left hand header, which is basically the same. You want to undo the nuts, remove the collar, undo the O2 sensor, and then gently wiggle the header until it slides free. Now you've got both headers removed, you can clean and polish them back to almost new. I use a bit of Autosol with a red Brillo pad to kind of scuff back the scale that builds up on the outside surface, and then once I'm done that, I give them a really good polish with a clean rag. You can see they come up really nice. Okay, now you're ready to refit the exhaust. So just replace the left-hand header, O2 sensor and the collar, and then just do up the nuts, but leave a little bit of play, make sure they're a little bit loose. Now if you're putting a new header or decat on, you'll need a new header gasket and possibly a pair of copper crush washers that sit inside the head. Altogether they cost about $30 from your local dealer. I'll throw a link in the description below and you can order them online as well. Next, refit the right hand header. It can be a little bit tricky. I found the easiest way is to sit the top header in and then twist the section down until you can slot it over the left hand header piece. Make sure you have the exhaust clamp positioned over the header piece with the nut facing upward so you can get in there to tighten it later. Next, refit the O2 sensor and tighten, then the collar, and loosely fit all the header nuts and clamp to make sure it all sits together nicely. Then, once it's all sitting properly, tighten up the clamp, then the right hand, then the left hand headers. The torque spec is about 20 newtons. Next, clean the exhaust clamps because they can get a bit rusty and dirty from heating up and cooling down, and they get exposed to a fair bit of dirt and dust. So then sit them loosely on the rear section of the exhaust and facing upwards. Then slot the rear section of the exhaust back onto the front so it just holds its weight. Now, get your punch and hammer and gently tap it in.
Other team, pull a goalie, it's wide open. All you gotta do is tap it in.
I can do that.
Are you too good for your home? Answer me!
If needed, you can put some heat into the rear section. This will cause the metal to expand, but you need to be very careful and make sure you don't burn yourself or any of the fuel lines that are in close proximity. Once that's done, tighten the clamps, refit the exhaust heat shields. I put some extra heat shield on mine just to keep the heat away from my leg a little bit more. Now, if you're fitting a leg saver, what you want to do is just loosely fit the black middle shield. You can use the left-hand bolt to slot through and just gently tighten it up, and then you can slot the leg saver over the right-hand edge of the shield, making sure that the bolt holes line up. Once you've done that, push the right-hand bolt through and twist until you get that loosely fitted. Just to note, you'll need a longer bolt when you're fitting the leg saver, just to be able to reach the captive nut that sits behind. Once that's tight, make sure you remember to tighten the remaining shield bolts and you're done.